welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with us. Do you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name's Nicholas Pilzner. I am the creator of Mostly Compliant Endpoint.com, and I'm also a Microsoft employee that works in the Intune realm. I'm a senior technical support engineer that's focused on Intune and kind of everything in the environment, or should I say, the managed environment and space.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time out of your weekend to chat with us. And first, we'll jump right in. Really would love to get an understanding around assigned access and when we see those templates for kiosks in Intune, why are there differences there and what should our viewers know about those?
Yeah, I think that's probably by far one of the best places to start because you see right off the bat you have two different avenues that you can go. You have the Intune templates, which are kind of your simpler, easy to use, admins that might not have as much experience or people that just want better visibility, right? You want a UI to develop something. That's where that will shine. I will say assigned access, though, gives you kind of the full suite. So, you get all the bells and whistles. You get a highly customizable experience, and it supports more different types of devices, which is one of the more important keys of it. As we're seeing the shift kind of to assigned access lately, one of the big use cases is multi-app kiosks. And when you talk about Windows 11 and multi-app kiosks, you're pretty much now forced down that assigned access route. So whether you may want to use it or not, unfortunately, you're going to probably be using it. But you get a lot out of it. If you want the full experience, you want all the bells and whistles, you want everything possible, we're going to go down that assigned access route.
Awesome. And if I am an administrator in Intune or just for Windows endpoints and I'm looking at assigned access, any tips for long-term success?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've worked with quite a few customers that kind of want to get into this realm. And this is one of the first things that we talk about is, how do you use it properly, more or less, or like how do you get the best value out of it? And I think one of the things that's most important is you need to treat it like a platform and not just like a one-time configuration. Pretty much with everything in the endpoint space, there's very few things that are truly now fire and forget nowadays. You need to constantly be reviewing things. You need to use, say, like version control, document your changes, keep things tightly controlled, and that will help you longer term. One of the biggest things you can do too is, validate apps. So make sure before you apply this that you're actually making sure those applications are installed, the prerequisites, the helpers, everything you need is on the machine before you implement it, or you may not have as great of a time after you get it on there because it does lock down your machine. And probably one of the other things I would say that is one of the most essential tips is leveraging like either a dedicated kiosk account or keeping zero trust and least privilege in mind. We don't necessarily want to be using, say, Entra or Azure accounts or domain accounts if you don't need to. Obviously, there are some needs for them, but those can introduce alternate risks, like you could expose domain resources, and you really just want to always keep least privilege in mind. If a standard user account that's local, it's just on that machine that can't get access to anything is fine, probably would go down that route. And obviously expand if and when needed. But yeah, always keep that least privilege in mind.
Are there any times when you'd recommend that somebody shouldn't use assigned access?
Yeah, I think it's easy to start where it does succeed, right, or where it does well. If your devices have, say, a singular or a narrow purpose, right, you're talking exam prep machines, front desk signage, or front desk check-in, digital signage, things of that nature, those always work well. Anything that has that kind of singular focus, if it's going to be a shared machine as well, that they're going to be using the same functionality across everybody, but you want to keep that consistent and you don't want them to, say, get exposed to other apps or the things that they don't need. Great use cases. Really, the biggest times I've seen customers go down that road where they probably shouldn't is if you're talking about your users need full productivity. You need, to frequently be switching apps, installing apps. You need admin flexibility. Those things really aren't synonymous with assigned access. They're really more trying to use a full ecosystem of Windows at that point. And if your app ecosystem is just highly dynamic, it's constantly changing, you need to constantly update it, this probably won't give you the best results, or you'll just be spending a lot of time updating it.
No, I think that's actually fascinating. That's really good advice. Something you mentioned there and earlier that really struck me once I realized it when I was testing initially was making sure you get all the apps pre-staged. And if you're using Intune, making sure you're not dumping into that kiosk user before the machine's finished setting up. And I found a lot of times, bloated machines going through autopilot and trying to get straight to a kiosk mode is not a good recipe for success. Starting with the sort of only required stuff that's needed and started with like a fresh slate, I
Yeah.
found to be really helpful as well with it. So I'm glad you mentioned some of those things and just validating that the apps are fully installed and present to be referenced once we're in assigned access, because things kind of stop to a point there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that you learn the hard way. Once you do it a
For
couple
sure.
times, it becomes very evident, like, okay, I got a process I'm going to follow to get this implemented, and it'll work better long term.
Any misconceptions with the technology that you've seen that you'd like to clear up around assigned access?
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less, I'd say the biggest one is it's not just a simple kiosk. I think that's kind of a really big point to kind of put out there, is that everybody will kind of hear to see it, and it's like, okay, you're using kiosk templates or you're using these things, but it's really a restricted shell. It uses app blocker, it uses CSP enforcement. You can do quite a bit more with it than just a simple kiosk. So while you could have just a simple edge, single app kiosk that only surfaces that, it really can go beyond that. I want to say, multi-app kiosks also, they're not completely like a full version of Windows. That's another one I'll hear where you'll kind of expect like, oh, I can do everything I can do in Windows on a multi-app kiosk. You can't, and it's intended that way because you're only supposed to be able to use the multiple apps you're given. Explorer is going to be slightly restricted. You can have other restrictions on USB devices, other things like that, and it is meant to more or less be its own standalone, not a full-blown version of Windows. And to our point earlier with the apps and the installs, right? You're using App Locker. It is kind of happening behind the scenes by how you set up the XML, but App Locker's still there. Only allowed apps can run. Helper processes need to be accounted for, and those things do obviously limit the types of apps or what you can run on them. So they are a lockdown instance, and I'd say that's a misconception. You can't just install whatever you want. You can't just run whatever you want. Sometimes I've had customers who will say, okay, I'm just going to now do this, or it's going to pivot this way. Well, you kind of have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and make sure that's all accounted for. And the biggest one I will say, and I kind of touched on it earlier, was if it works once, it will always work. That is definitely a misconception. I think that's a misconception in technology as a whole, just with how fast the landscape changes, whether it's changes from the Intune side, it's changes from the device level, from the software side. I mean, there's so many avenues, right? We could see changes nowadays. So I think making sure that those are accounted for, even schema changes, right? Adding new features, removing features. We need to be on that mindset of like, let's constantly revise it, or have that mindset to like, okay, we're going to look into what's new, we're going to test what's new, and then we will adapt. I think the adaptation mindset is very important for stuff like this.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like always when I'm shipping like different kiosk assigned access templates, it's always like a finished product, right? And if we want to go back to it, we should start from the ground up, so to speak. Once we start putting it into production, it's sort of like locked, right? And that's kind of I think a really important point. I'm glad you bring that up. I would love to know your opinions around single app and the multi-app mode.
So I think single app is going to be traditional. It's your one function desktops, your one function computers. So again, like your signage, digital signage, check-in terminals, public-facing web apps, things of that nature, right? If you only have one need, and it's that one need will satisfy all the use cases really in the computer, go single app. It's going to obviously have better security, minimal user distractions. They're easier to support because there's really not as much going on. Whereas multi-app are going to be focused like you have users with multiple tools, or they might need some flexibility on doing certain things versus other things. If the devices are shared but task-oriented, I usually kind of go towards multi-app because that way you can encompass more. One of the beauties of assigned access is you can have profiles. So you're not just stuck pushing one template and you have to have 10 different templates assigned to 10 different groups and all these groups maintained. You can have that in your assigned access XML in one XML. And that way, depending on who signs in, you get a different profile. So I think that's a really strong point. You can do it with single, but multi-app, it really shines there. because then you can control what they see and what they do. So yeah, lab stations, training environments, exam environments. Say if you have an inventory and browser app that needs to upload and do kind of other things there, all great examples of multi-app.
So now, can you tell us a little bit about the app you made to help admins develop and test their assigned access configs?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the most daunting or the scariest part of assigned access is that XML file. There are some really great examples on MS Learn. The tricky part, I would say, is trying to walk through that process is a little bit more challenging right now because, or at least before the app, there wasn't really a set way of saying, I'll walk you through each step of what you want to add, what you want to use, and then you can get this XML at the end. So my goal was really, I've worked with a few customers on it, and going through that was always, I think I told you earlier, it was tedious. You don't really get that satisfaction of like, I can just plug things in, I can pick things off a desktop, right? And so the goal of this app was it will not only walk you through every step of the way. So how many profiles do you need? What apps do you want to use? It'll even let you say if you have it installed on your kiosk or on that device you have set up like a kiosk, you can browse to your UWP apps. You can browse to your apps. You can get files and executables, links. You can kind of pick things in a much easier fashion and then build it out, and it will give you the full XML at the end. So much, in my opinion, much more user-friendly method. I love using GUIs. Any type of UI you can put in front of me for something, I'm all about it. So I figured it would just be a really easy way to help more customers get where they want to be.
All right, so last question.
Yep.
What's the best way for people to stay up to date on assigned access?
I think truthfully, the best way right now probably is leveraging Microsoft Learn. As far as new features, schema updates, recommendations, right? There's a ton of Windows version nuances too that are kind of covered there. It really does touch on a widespread of functionality, how you can use it in XML examples, which I think can be very important. Obviously, if you use the tool, it will help you kind of guide through that, but it always can help sometimes to see this is the underlying process. This is what it looks like in a generic example, and then you can compare that to your own. There also are some great real-world blogs out there, yours as well, mine, things that you will see from the community. So I always like to leverage the community. I think you can find a lot of people that are passionate in this area, and they will help give you really in-depth information and help you kind of get down that path as well. So whether it's the community or Microsoft Learn, I think they're both not going to steer you wrong, and they're going to get you exactly where you want to be.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you that the community aspect to all this stuff is really what drives the full learning, I think. And that's what I think makes Microsoft just such an awesome and powerful platform is the community that really drives it. And yeah, so many great resources, and definitely we'll include your blog and resources in the description here of this video. So definitely should check that out. And Nick, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us.